Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wandering Quill Book Impressions episode here on the channel. I know it's been a long time since I've done one of these, and I am sorry for that. But I'm back now, and today we'll be reviewing the first few chapters of Afterglow. Now, Afterglow Rising comes courtesy from author Stacey LP, who I've had featured on the channel not too long ago. Afterglow Rising is a character-driven, post-apocalyptic, light sci-fi trilogy. Set in Austin, Texas, survivors fight to move past the aftermath of an alien invasion. And little do they know that their fight has only just begun. With vicious creatures, abduction, and victims returning, and looming threats on the rise, our main characters must figure out how to put the fractured pieces of themselves back together, lest the flames in the Afterglow reclaim them. And Afterglow has a diverse ensemble cast that includes queer representation and main characters in their 30s. There's elements of found family, grumpy sunshine dynamics, heart-pounding action, and slow burn romance. And this is a book that I have been very, very eager to read for quite some time. So, without further ado, let's dive in to Chapter 1 of Afterglow Rising. The sound of a scream caught me off guard, and I tripped back a step, looking over my shoulder in time to see a flash of red dart past me. I whirled around to see Emma dive, legs disappearing over the ledge of the dock into the water. My best friend reemerged with a splash as she burst through the surface of the lake and pulled herself back up onto the pier. Come on, don't tell me you haven't been looking forward to this all week. Emma smiled brightly as she shook out her short red hair. All right, little mermaid, I laughed, jogging the rest of the way over. Emma scrunched her nose, tilting her head to look at me as her hand shielded her eyes from the sun. Little mermaid, really? I mean, red hair, water. It was the first thing that popped into my head. I'll do better next time, I shrugged, sitting down and dipping my toes into the water, lounging on the dock, water gently lapping as the sun warmed my shoulders. I could feel the tension from the work week melting away already. Emma and I already visited this lake with her older brother Jason when we were kids. As years passed, our trips grew further apart, but no matter how much time went by, it always felt like it was still our place. When was the last time we were here, anyway? Emma slipped her sunglasses over her eyes, laying back on the dock as she sighed. Oh, I was just looking at pictures from that weekend. It was when Jason came home from the West Coast. You know, as his whole engagement fiasco. Your hair was blue, so it must have been around then. Emma tilted her sunglasses down to give me a look. I grimaced. Though it had been years, the regret from my post-breakup impulse hair decision still haunted me. My hair has always been dark brown and wavy. I'm not quite sure what made me pick blue of all colors. I'd only gotten subtle, natural-looking highlights up until then. The blue thoroughly washed me out. Even my hazel eyes dulled against the hue. I stubbornly stuck it out for a few weeks, until I finally admitted I hated it. Safe to say, that was one choice I would not be repeating. I looked at Emma lying beside me, her natural red hair shining in the sun. I could see a spot on her shoulder where she'd missed rubbing some sunscreen, and without another thought I reached over to blend it in for her. Miss a spot. Thanks, friend, Emma replied cheerily. You know my palette needs all the protection it can get. She nailed me with a severe look. You remembered your sunscreen too, right? When we were kids, Emma had gotten a bad burn, landing her in the hospital with dehydration and heat stroke. She'd been militant about sunscreen ever since, going so far as to limit your time in direct sunlight during the height of summer. I was surprised she wanted to come to the lake today during peak UV hours. I kicked the leg up, the SPF lotion I'd thrown on, giving my tawny skin a soft glow in the sun. SPF 30, baby. Good, Emma said, satisfied. I laid back, closing my eyes as my mind drifted to our last lake visit just over 5 years ago. Jason had been living in California with his fiancée. A few weeks before their wedding date, he came home to find her in bed with her best guy friend, yet somehow he was the one who was kicked out of their apartment. Emma and I were still in Connecticut back then, so he decided to move across the country to live temporarily with his and Emma's parents so we all could be close to each other. Before he'd even had a chance to unpack, he insisted on a lake campout to get his mind off everything. The three of us sat on this same dock, passing a bottle of vodka back and forth while Jason groaned about all the signs he'd missed, just a shade above self-deprecation. Eventually, Emma and I turned the conversation to reminiscing about our most embarrassing moments growing up, leaving our sides aching with laughter before long. Tired from drinking in the late afternoon sun, Emma closed her eyes, just for a minute, which turned into several hours. Jason and I continued hanging out well into the sunset. As Emma's best friend since childhood, I spent just as much time around Jason over the years. No matter how much time had passed between those conversations, we could always pick up where we left off. The more vodka I drank, the more I couldn't stop staring at the way his blue eyes reflected in the water from the lake as he, yet again, ran his hand through his tousled ash-blonde hair. Whether it was the vodka or both of us rebonding from recent breakups, that had been a moment where I swore there was something there. I remembered how the space seemed to spark with electricity as the distance closed between us, our body heat mingling as our skin almost touched. Of course, Emma had woken up before anything happened, and the night was uneventful from there on. Yes, and I never mentioned the almost moment, but I had certainly thought about it over the years. A gentle breeze picked up, and I shivered as the memory slipped away. The air carried a sharp chill, breaking through the heat radiating from the sun. I sat up and hugged my knees while staring at the lake. I couldn't believe we didn't make the time to do this more often. The older we got, the quieter time seemed to drift by. Days grew into weeks, that dripped into months, and poured into years. I decided then that I would slow down, take more PTO, and make more memories like this. A pang squeezed in my chest, knowing that even this moment was fleeting. The sun's rays danced across the water, shimmering with gentle ripples. As the water's edge, a shadow slowly rolled across the shore. I tilted my head, watching the shade bloom as it reached the lake. The shadow grew, dimming the sun's reflective light. Silhouettes from trees that stretched across the once glittering surface faded into a gray, dull gray, as the darkness spread. I shivered again, feeling goosebumps rise on my flesh. Hey, is this supposed to rain? I didn't see... A gasp escaped as I jolted upright. The dock was empty beside me. I was alone. I scrambled for my flip-flops, calling out, Emma! Emma! My gaze darted across the tree line past the dock for any sign of my friend. The shadow covered the lake entirely, and now I felt a pull calling me, begging me to look up at the sky. I gritted my teeth, shaking my head. No, this wasn't right. I forced myself to move, feeling like I was wading through quicksand as I tried to reach the end of the dock. My legs grew heavier with each step. A mechanical groan echoed from the clouds, and I fell to my knees, clutching my head. Why is this happening? Where is Emma? Nothing about the situation felt right. My legs went numb as I scrambled to find my footing again, just to fall down to the ground. Emma! I yelled, voice breaking. Shivers rolled through my body as I stretched out my arms, clawing into the ground to pull myself forward. My heart pounded, every beat feeling like a punch to the chest. Eyes wide, hands still clawing for purchase. I finally turned my head to look up at the sky. A bright white light flooded my vision, consuming everything around me before I plunged into darkness. My head felt like it had been squeezed in a vice, pounding, endlessly, relentlessly pounding. Groggily, I struggled to lift my eyelids. It felt like they were anchored shut. The leftover disorientation from my nightmare hung around my tired body like a mist as I pushed to bring myself back to full consciousness. How long had I been asleep? My eyes struggled to focus as my head swarmed and bile crept up my throat. Was I hungover? Or did I have the flu? I wish I was still at the lake with Emma and started slipping back into sleep. A warm fuzziness wrapped around my brain. Maybe we could go to the lake later today. Wait. No. That lake was back in Connecticut, which explained the nostalgic start of the dream sequence. We moved to Austin 2 years ago, so it had truly been a while since we visited that lake. I forced my mind the rest of the way back towards consciousness before the second half of my dream turned nightmare could creep back into my head. Straining, I finally lift my eyelids as I blinked to try and regain focus. My heart stuttered as my eyesight finally adjusted. Transparent, yellow-tinged walls surrounded me in a space no bigger than a coffin. That's when I knew. I wasn't waking up from a typical night of rest. The root of my unconsciousness had to be something much deeper, more sinister. Maybe I wasn't fully awake. Maybe I was still trapped in a nightmare. Nausea just rolled in my stomach, my heart rate rising as I struggled to lift my leaden arms. I couldn't move. Why couldn't I move? The panic erupted from my chest, seeming to fill up the remaining space in the encasement as a soft blue light reflected off the walls. Sharp, prickling pain radiated through my veins with every slight movement. The pins and needles stung like a wasp, sticking me repeatedly all over. This wasn't a bad dream. I was in a waking nightmare. I squeezed my eyes shut as my heart pounded, the stinging still vibrating through my body. Please, please, please. Shaky words crackled from my dry throat as I begged my lungs to hold oxygen. The tight space was starting to feel like it was caving in, and I couldn't tell if the air was truly thin or if my lungs were struggling from hyperventilation. My heart was pounding as I choked back sobs, closed my eyes, and tried to count slowly in my head to bring my heart rate down. 1, 2, 3, 4. My head swam as I tried to remember anything that could give me a clue as to where I was, but the memories were too far out of reach. After digging deep to pull up what remained of my courage, I forced myself to open my eyes again. Though I couldn't move to reach out a hand just yet, my eyes traced the outline of the encasement. As my sight adjusted, I realized it wasn't a solid tomb. The sides curved outwards, almost in an egg shape. At the top, a deep groove carved an indent against one of the rounded edges. Maybe it was a potential opening. Okay, if there's an opening, there's hope. I will get out of here. I will get out. Slowly, the prickling in my extremities dulled, and I regained feeling in my fingers and toes. I cried out loud with relief as the sensation trickled back into my arms and legs. After what felt like hours, I was finally able to lift out a hand. I didn't hesitate before as I started pounding my fists against the encasement as hard as I could. The more feeling returned, the harder I was able to shove the top of my prison. I punched and pushed with my fists, and once I could move my legs, I started kicking against the top. A click popped and a sliver of natural light poked through the crack along the indentation. It opened. I pushed against the lid of my encasement while struggling to pull myself upright at the same time. Finally, I was able to shove the lid all the way open. It swung back on a hinge, and I couldn't help but feel I'd crawled out of the tomb, back from the dead. Now that I could see the whole thing, it resembled a round nap pod more than a coffin I imagined it to be. At least it didn't appear it was meant to be a final resting place. Keep looking on the bright side, Lee. I tried to encourage myself. I wanted nothing more than to pull myself completely out of the pod, but my head was swirling from dizziness, so instead I leaned against the opening, gripping the sides like a life raft. My stomach swirled with nausea as I lifted a hand to wipe away the tears, sweat, and probably snot that was running down my face. Cringing, I rubbed my eyes, feeling a slight pull on the back of my hand. Oh, fuck. Black, oily-looking tubes trailed from the veins in my hand, down my arm, and through a small opening at the bottom of the pod. Gasping, my hand jerked away from my face. The sharp movement blurred my vision as my head spun and bowel crept up my throat again. I swallowed hard, exhaling slowly to keep my breathing stable. The last thing I needed to do was to puke all over my... What was I wearing? The opaque, gauzy fabric initially looked like a loose, knee-length tunic, but the texture reminded me of a shedded snakeskin. With shaking hands, I gripped the tubes where they met my veins, taking a deep breath before yanking them out my skin. They let go with slurping sounds as the suction released. Circular indentations were left at the spots when they were connected to my skin, reminding me of tiny teeth marks. But that wasn't all. I struggled to fight off the dizziness swirling in my head as I noticed suction cup shells stuck on my chest, shoulders, and arms. No, 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 I moaned. The discs throbbed every few seconds, swelling like sponges full of blood. With a whimper, I poked at one of the discs. Please tell me this thing isn't alive. Its surface caved with the pressure of my fingertip, but it felt more like plastic. A mild relief. Frantically, I pulled off the adhesions that clung to my body like slugs, throwing them away over the sides of the capsule I was sitting in. As I tried to quell my shaking limbs, I looked around the room. It appeared to be an office conference of some kind, or at least it used to be. A whiteboard took up one whole wall, and there was a few scattered desk chairs. Against an adjacent wall, a lone screen that likely served as a former conference room video monitoring hung. The rest of the space was crammed in with foreign, bulky metal devices that looked like they were painted with black oil. Given the tubes and discs that adorned my skin, I assumed the equipment was medical, though nothing resembled any of the machines or tools I was used to dealing in a doctor's office. I tested my legs, bending them gently so I wouldn't trigger more vertigo when I noticed one more shiny blue tube leading down my leg, connected to a clear bag of yellow liquid fluid hanging from a pod. Oh, hell, no, no, no. And I moaned, realizing exactly where my body it was attached. Slowly, so slowly, I raised my shaking hand between my legs and felt a thick, hard shell cupping me. I winced as I stuck a finger underneath the lip of the device, prying it from my body, and threw the apparatus on the floor. I couldn't hold back the urge to vomit any longer. I couldn't have imagined this. In my worst nightmares, what happened to me? How long have I been here? Did anyone even know I was gone? I sobbed as I dry heaved, unable to ignore the violation that coated me like a second skin. If I could, I would have abandoned my body just to escape the feeling. Once I finished heaving and was able to gather some strength, I pulled my body up to lean over the open lid of the pod. I had to get out, use this time to get as far away as possible before whoever abducted me came back. I clung to the side of the container, struggling as I lifted a leg to straddle the opening and ease myself up and over. I hit the floor with a smack and groan. Pushing upright, I panted as I looked around the room. Okay, I got this, I whispered, gripping the side of the pod for balance as I stood with shaking legs. Finally, in upright position, I took inventory of my body. From what I could see, my skin was unharmed, even with the indentations from the tubes and disc seemed to be fading quickly without the devices attached. The jackhammer in my head had subdued to a dull throb, and the nausea was easing a bit as well. Aside from the nausea and headache, only my nerves plagued me. I wasn't in pain otherwise. Still, my familiar curves, the soft swell of my hips, and the fullness of my thighs felt different somehow. The muscles beneath, stiff from being cramped in the pod for who knows how long, felt taut and firm as I stretched to awaken my limbs further. My memory snapped back to the nightmare I had just before waking up in my pod. I rubbed at the temples and tried to make sense of the images floating in my head. I knew that the lake part was definitely a dream. The bright light, though, the fear that came with that part of the nightmare was too familiar to only have happened in my dreams. A wave of nausea hit me once more as I sank back on the floor to rest my head between my knees. Emma and Jason, if I was here, where were they? I struggled to pull any memories forward, but it was still a jumbled mess. I recalled fear, tension, and panic, but couldn't figure out why. Once again, I rose to my feet, pushing down the panic and grasping tighter to the small thread of determination I was able to find. The more I moved, the steadier my steps became. I made it out of the conference room to the center of the office space when the soft padding of footsteps echoed from the adjacent hallway. I froze in place as my pulse pounded. I knew it wasn't fast enough to return to the room I'd just come from, but I couldn't stand the open either. Move! Move! I whispered, forcing my legs to carry me to a small mountain of office furniture stacked in the corner of the room. With aching knees, I lowered myself on the floor, and a flash memory sparked behind my eyes. A shelter-in-place order. Emma's panicked voice on the phone. Something impossibly large blocking the sky over the city. Unidentified aircraft. Jason. Relief. Worry. fear. We need to get to Emma. I snapped back to the present as the sounds from the hallway drew closer. A soft murmur echoed in the empty space, followed by a light sob and frantic whisper. People. And they were scared. Maybe they were taken just like me. I took a gamble, choked down my fear, and softly rasped, "Hello?" A gasp echoed through the space, followed by shushing sounds. More whispers, and a male voice called out, "How many?" Confusion blanketed my face, and I rubbed the side of my head, trying to understand the question. "How many what? How many are there?" the voice snapped. "It's just me," I answered. I woke up in a pod thing, and there were tubes, and... Oh, hell. I choked out, unable to keep the emotion from my words. I slowly stood, realizing there was no point of hiding any longer. Shuffling closer to the hallway, I saw 3 shadows on the walls, 3 people. I let out a sob of relief when I saw they were dressed in identical gauze-like gowns, if only for solidarity. A young girl, maybe 16 or 17, rushed towards me, grasping my forearm as tears streamed down her face. "We woke up a while ago and been trying to find a way out since. There are so many locked doors. Have you seen anybody else? Are you okay?" I took in the sight of her. Limp, black hair draped over her shoulder, and the gauzy gown looked shallow against her smooth, pale skin. The corners of her lips cracked, trembled, and I saw the same fear I felt reflected in her eyes. I glanced back at the room. "No, I mean, yeah, just me. My name's Lena, and I..." The room started spinning, and I swayed. An older woman with a deep mahogany complexion jolted forward, wrapping an arm around my waist to brace my body against hers. "Let's get you out of here. Come on, we'll help you. I'm Jean." She gave me a tight-lipped smile, which was more than I could muster. "I'm Gabriella," the girl sniffled, raising a hand in greeting. "That's Ben out there." I nodded, thanking Jean and stepping away once I regained some steadiness. The 3 of us quickly moved back to the hallway where Ben waited. In the dark hallway, he looked older than Jean, maybe in his late 60s, with a pale, almost jaundiced skin tone. The 4 of us shuffled as fast as we could, passing more glass-walled conference rooms. Jean quietly explained how they searched any rooms that weren't locked. There was a staircase that connected the levels of the buildings internally, but any exit doors leading outside, even fire exits, had been locked. Not only were they locked, but we couldn't turn on any lights. If it weren't for the giant shadows, we'd be stuck in the dark. The power was cut entirely. Most of the other conference rooms held victims who were still contained in their pods. However, those people weren't as lucky as we were. Jean informed me in a quiet voice that the other people they found appeared to have passed away before anyone could find them. I thought of their families, and how they might never get answers as to what happened to their loved ones. What about my own family? What did they think happened to me? Just as we were about to turn around another corner, I drove it to a halt, almost tripping Jean. "Wait! There are 2 pods in there." I bit my lip nervously. Ben looked back, our eyes darting between us. "Pods? You know those giant test tubes?" No one else was alive in the other room. Those probably just have more dead bodies. We should keep moving. "I was alive," I replied, defensiveness growing in my chest, "and I don't know what I would have done if you all hadn't found me. Waking up alone in there. We have to check at least. I'm not going to leave another person behind." Frustration carved deeper into Ben's face before I turned to the door, sliding open. Jean followed me in and together we lifted the lid of the first pod. A teenage boy who appeared no older than 18 lay inside too still. His skin had dulled, waxy sheen, and my breath caught in my throat as Jean stepped closer. She reached into the open pod and placed her fingers at the pulse point of his neck. We waited in silence for a moment longer before she grimacely shook her head. "See?" Ben scoffed. "I told y'all. Not worth it to wait. There's still another pod," I snapped. The other pods sat in the back of the room. I rushed to the back, digging my fingers into the lid grooves. The hinge creaked as I opened this one. When I saw the person inside, I fell back a step, almost dropping the lid. Jean caught it and took over, opening the pod before it could close again. A whimper left my lips, and I fell to the ground. "How?" My breath came in short gasps. "What's wrong?" Gabriella came from the door, wide brown eyes staring inside at us. Ben peered in from behind her, his bulky frame shadowing hers, but neither came close. "He's alive!" Jean yelled as she pulled the disc and tubes from his body. "Better to do this before he regains consciousness," she muttered. Not a minute after she pulled the last suction disc from his chest, I heard a groan from inside the tinted encasement. Is he alive? Is he awake, I guess? Scrambling to stand. I pushed past Jean to peer into the pod, still shaking. Tentatively, I reached down to grasp his limp palm of mine. He groaned again, eyes rolling underneath his closed lids. I imagined he was feeling a sharp, tingling sensation returning to his limbs just as I imagined. He fought whatever sedation was still in the system, struggling to find his way back to consciousness. Ben was still complaining, but I could only focus on the face of the blonde-haired man in front of me. I clutched his hand, refusing to take my eyes off him, while Jean and Gabrielle argued with Ben in the background. Finally, those brilliant blue eyes opened and met mine. I choked back another sob and studied his pale face. "Hi," I softly whispered, tears pouring down my cheeks as I brushed the hair from his sweaty forehead. "Alina, Lee, you're here?" He rasped. "Yes, Jason, it's me. I'm here," I cried, reaching over the side of the pod to hug his limp body. And with that, people, we are going to stop here. Now, that is actually a great introduction to sort of like an alien invasion, alien abduction story. Now, from the first chapter, I like how it slowly builds into the world. And yes, this is the first chapter, so it doesn't give us a lot of information of what happened. We can kind of guess. And I like how Stacey has been able to craft it. This was uncomfortable. Like, I love how she made Alina go through something that was very uncomfortable, like literally in a pod with suctions discs all over her, trying to figure out what's going on. So I really do appreciate that story, and it reads very well. It has its nice flow. It's definitely trying to stand out in the alien invasion, which I absolutely love. And yes, found family in the first chapter. We can clearly see that. So I really do like this story. I'm so glad to be back to doing this series because I really miss doing these book impressions videos. Now, story, as I said, read perfectly. There wasn't anything that really stood out to me. I love how we get, like, brief glimpses into what might have happened. So we can assume that the dream was probably something that happened in the past, and now she's waking up in the present. Again, we don't know what happened. The only thing we know is that, that there's a shelter in place in order that happened. An unidentified aircraft was covering over the sky of the city, and Emma, Jason, and Alina were separated. Well, now we know that Alina and Jason are together, but where's Emma? So now we have to figure out what's going to happen. Now, this, I will say, is definitely a 4 out of 5 story. And honestly, it's really good so far. And it really does set up the tone that it looks like the story may be set in this office building of some kind for the first half before we see, what's on the outside world. So there is tension out there, which leads to wonder, is the whole story going to be in the building? Possibly. We don't know. You would have to read the book for yourself, which I'll provide the link down below, as well as tagging Stacey's interview right over here for you to view. So with that, viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us for another Wandering Scribe Book Impressions episode here on the channel. Make sure to purchase a copy of the book down below and leave a review on Amazon and Goodreads. Reviews definitely help gain attention and recognition for the author. And make sure to look out for next month's Wandering Scribe book review of the month. Until next time, this is Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Scribe, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world.